I'm Haley.
I'm Hunter.
I'm Sheila.
And we are Literate.
Welcome to our new podcast where we, three college English majors, rate and discuss literature that has recently captivated our minds.
About every 2 weeks, we'll get together to discuss a group book that we've each spent time reading. Okay, and so we're going to start with what we're reading right now, individually. So right now, I'm reading Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov and Mansfield Park by Jane Austen.
I am also reading Lolita right now, but I just finished The Bellwether Revivals by Benjamin Wood, and it has huge dark academia vibes and takes place at Cambridge.
I'm currently reading two different things. The first being And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, which is the highest-selling mystery novel of all time. It's basically the stereotypical people come together and murder mystery. They all die. It's fun. And then, which isn't a spoiler, I think. And then the other book I'm reading, while I'm walking around on campus, walking back and forth, I've been listening to this audiobook about the history of The Simpsons. It's a really niche topic, but it's really interesting, and I really enjoy it. And, yeah, that's what's been on my mind recently. What books are y'all kind of wanting to read soon?
I really want to read The Secret Life of Addie LaRue.
Oh, by Victoria Schwab.
Yes, I want to read it so bad. I got a coupon on Amazon, so now it's only $13. I'm very tempted.
I got it from Book of the Month, and it's at my house. So when I go home this weekend, I'm going to grab it.
Hunter got me Ninth House for my birthday, and I know it's one of his favorites, and I'm sure I'm going to like it because it has...
And it's Dark Academia.
Dark Academia.
Yeah.
We love Dark Academia, so that's what I want to read next.
Yeah, pretty much same. I'm going off of Dark Academia. I want to read The Secret History soon because Donna Tartt, like I said, is my favorite.
Yeah, that's
author.
my favorite book.
She's my lock screen on my computer, which is kind of weird. But I love The Goldfinch so much, and The Secret History is actually considered better than The Goldfinch, so I'm excited to read that.
I've only read The Secret History, but I really want to read The Goldfinch, purely because of Hunter. I also have a copy at home, so may as well put it to use.
Because I hype it up so much.
Yes.
It'd be disappointing if
I'm
you
also,
hate it.
Oh my god, I'd be so scared if I don't like it.
You'd be scared to bring it up to me.
Yes.
'Cause
we wouldn't be friends anymore.
That's my lifeline.
Oh, okay, and also, here's a common theme. Our next book is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, which is why me and Haley are reading it right now. Hunter.
I'll get to it eventually.
We're supposed to have it done by Saturday.
And it's not. It's
Wednesday.
Fine.
Okay, so today Hunter and I went to Dunkin' Donuts, and I got an iced latte with oat milk and French vanilla swirl and whipped cream.
I got a hot latte with French vanilla swirl and whole milk. Sheila, what coffee do you have today?
I have no coffee.
Because Sheila did not want to wake up.
Yeah, Hunter and I woke up at 6 a.m. and Sheila said, I'm going to sleep in.
I'm going to wake
for
up
this
at 7
podcast.
Right, so now she's coffeeless and tired.
Sheila's not as committed to this podcast as we
Right.
are.
Okay. I see how it
doesn't work
is.
on me anymore. I have to go through caffeine.
Okay.
Withdrawals. Caffeine rehab.
Okay.
Okay, so now going into our main discussion of the podcast, of this episode.
Yeah.
The Virgin Suicides. Did we even say that?
Nope.
We did not.
We're reading we've read the Virgin
We've read
Suicides.
the Virgin Suicides for this episode, which y'all have no way of knowing. So
you had no idea. Surprise.
You either have read this book before and are going to listen to it, or you haven't and you're going to listen to it because you care about us.
Okay.
So, surprise, we've read The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides.
Yes.
Which took me several days to get to say right.
Yeah.
And so what I'm going to do is give a brief summary of this book, or like the premise of the book, essentially. So The Virgin Suicides, I think it takes place in like the 70s.
Yeah.
Like typical suburban neighborhood America.
Yeah, like Perfect Town.
Perfect Town,
Yeah,
middle
American
class
Dream.
Americans.
Yeah.
And it tells the story of this family. They're the Lisbon family. It's
Mm-hmm.
this mother and father and their 5 girls.
Mm-hmm.
Which, first of all, ooh. But, okay, feel sorry for the father, which is a theme that gets touched on in the book.
Funny.
Funny. Anyway, so basically it's called The Virgin Suicides because at points in this novel, each of the 5 daughters end up committing suicide.
Yeah.
That's not a spoiler. You learn that on the first page.
And the summary on the back. So.
Yeah, right. So basically that's what happens, and it kind of doesn't really explain why they kill themselves, but kind of it's through the point of view of the boys in their neighborhood and how that suicide has kind of affected them and how these girls have affected them overall. So it's kind of not about the suicides themselves, but kind of the effects of the suicides to these neighborhood boys and the community around them.
Yeah.
And kind of how they react to them.
Yeah, and I wanted to point out that there's a few takes on the title. So I always interpret it as relating to the Virgin Mary because, we'll talk about it later, but there is a relation between the suicides and the Virgin Mary pops up, it's kind of like vaguely touched on, and I wish they went more into depth with that. But also, I read that it's a metaphor for like the girls' innocence and purity. While some of them are actually virgins, some of them are not. So, yeah, it's definitely a metaphor for their like innocence and how young they are.
See, that's what I thought. I thought going in the virgin suicide is referring that each of them were virgins.
We're virgins, but
that's not.
Yeah, that's not the case.
That's what we'll get into.
Yeah.
And also, before we tackle this episode, of course, I need to add a trigger warning for both suicide and grief.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's a given considering the title of the novel.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna all give our general thoughts and opinions now. Okay, so I gave it 3 at first, 3 stars out of 5, but I think it might be more like 2.75. I like the...
She's getting specific.
I am. Well, it's not like low enough to be 2.5, but also like not high enough to be 3.3, so,
So in between.
We have to average it out. But yeah, I don't know. I like the concept of it a lot, but I don't think the execution was as well done as it could have been.
Yeah, I agree with Sheila. I enjoyed the beginning and the ending of the book, but the middle was like, I don't know, it was really dry. And so I know that Hunter and maybe Sheila have a different opinion on this, but I really liked that the book didn't focus as much on the girls' personalities themselves and like their thoughts, but rather the reader got this like outside perspective on how their suicides affected the community. Other than that, though, there were like misogynistic tones, and it was kind of weird to read about how the girls were described by a boy who is the unnamed narrator. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and I know Sheila and I talked about this, but we both gave it a little extra just for the last like 20 pages or so.
Yeah, I gave it, I think I am the outlier in the group. I liked it a lot less than both Sheila and Haley. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Whereas I do like Jeffrey Eugenides' writing style. It is kind of unique. And what I really like about this novel is the point of view it's told from.
Yeah.
It's very unique that it could have been told from the typical, like, from their point of views, and we could have got their nuances, but instead we kind of got this outlook from the neighborhood boys, which I really enjoyed, and it was kind of really intelligent in the way he did that. But the entire novel, for me, kind of felt like this voyeuristic and kind of, like, creepy looking at these girls and the fact that they're basically objectified for the entire novel. And then on a later point we'll touch on later, it's like they affected them, but they never like looked deeply into the Lisbon girls, and it kind of really bothered me. And also sometimes in the middle of the book it kind of drags on, and it's a really short book. It's less than 300 pages, and for a short book I feel like you can't have too much that drags on, but I felt like it dragged on a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to touch on was discussing the narrators of the novel, the unnamed neighborhood boys. So the entire book is told by an unnamed narrator who is a male like classmate of the girls, and it's set up in like an ancient Greek tragedy, sort of, with the chorus telling the story as it goes. And as I was explaining in my review, I really liked what the author did here, and my biggest takeaway from the book was that by the time the girls ended up committing suicide, the community seemed to be somewhat numb to it, and people eventually went back to normal, or even took it a step further when the one family threw the asphyxiation-themed party, which is a reference to how one of the girls, Lux, died. And the boys were the ones who discovered the girls dead on multiple occasions, so by having this outside perspective on what the girls were going through, I was intrigued by how their deaths impacted the community. And also, I think it was intentional that the girls had absolutely zero personality. It reminded the reader that the boys and other members of the community were so in love with the girls that they hardly bothered to get to know them at all. And the boys saw themselves as saviors when they were nothing of the sort, and in the end paid the price.
I like that you bring up that they discovered the bodies, so of course that would be very traumatic for the boys.
Right.
Which I agree. But in the very same sense, the entire novel leading up to that, they didn't really care much about their personalities. So, I don't know. It's very juggling with me because, once again, of course you can have grief.
Yeah.
And be traumatized from that
And, like, in
experience. I mean,
shock.
I would be traumatized from that experience, probably for the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
Seeing 3 to 4 girls in
Mhm.
various different methods.
And finding Cecilia, who attempted before she actually
that's right.
committed suicide.
And they're there when her suicide happens as well.
Oh yeah, they're at a party.
Yeah, which let me talk about that. The very first suicide of the novel happens after she's already attempted suicide,
Yeah.
and the parents just lets her go upstairs
By herself.
by herself
Which, like, it's hard because
for the party that was for her.
right.
Also another thing, who throws a party after their daughter
I don't know.
has attempted suicide?
Okay, and it's hard to because like the whole point of like or the what it seems like is the girls committed suicide because they felt so oppressed by their parents, and
That's what
so
I think.
it's
I think the
like-
worst people in this novel are the parents.
oh, absolutely,
definitely.
100%. They're definitely like the villains of the novel. But at the same time, it's like I was surprised that the parents let Cecilia just go upstairs and stuff. But then also I think that's why they became so much more restrictive after Cecilia died, because then they were like, oh, we can't
Right.
let them go anywhere alone.
Plus, also, the psychologist, in response to Cecilia, also says to give her privacy,
Oh yeah.
which I think is true.
Mhm.
But also, there's some like telltale signs
Oh,
in the child
absolutely.
that I feel like they should have caught on.
Mhm.
Which this is how Cecilia dies. She
Oh.
jumps out her window and lands on a spike of a fence,
Yeah.
impaling her.
Yeah.
That's messed up.
Yeah.
I'm just
It
saying.
was kind of hard to read. Honestly, the entire thing was really hard to read.
Honestly, though, if I was the parents, I would just moved out of the house, like, after Cecilia died with the other girls.
Mhm.
Because I would have been too horrendous.
Funny.
For the sake of the podcast, man just came in here and took some chairs. So.
But we're in our school's library right
Yeah.
now. But that'd be an interesting addition to the podcast. What was I
Okay.
gonna say? Oh, I wanted to bring up that. Oh, by the way, we all watched the movie
Oh yeah.
later in the week after we all finished the book.
Mhm.
In the movie, I liked that it kind of made me personally made me more sympathetic towards the father. And the text there's
Mhm.
some too, because he always
Yeah.
talks about wanting a boy.
Yeah. Mhm.
But also, you're a father,
Right.
and you gotta deal with what the cards are dealt to you. You gotta play with the cards are dealt
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say.
Like, the mom knew how to discipline, but he didn't, so he just went with the flow.
Yeah.
mom.
But she
She
did too much.
She was a dictator.
Yeah.
That was my thing with Eugenides. Every female in the novel, even the mom,
Mhm.
has less personality than the males.
Oh yeah.
The males don't even have names.
Which
for the
could be
most
because
part.
it's written by a man. Like.
But like, you're writing about a man, and you're trying to have the complexities of these females' suicides.
Yeah. Mhm.
But you can't dive deep into the complexity. That was my
Yeah.
largest problem with the
Yeah.
novel, is that suicide is a complex thing, and it doesn't have a
Mhm.
straight answer, which he kind of tackles into,
Yeah.
but he does it from a male's perspective when
Yeah. Well, and I think that was the point, because like the girls were seen as these like angelic, like untouchable figures,
hmm
So
which kind of adds to the virgin thing.
yeah.
I don't know. You could definitely tell that book was written by a man. Like,
Oh,
whenever he described the
absolutely.
girls, which, like, took me out of the book as well. Because when he was describing the periods,
Mhm.
at, like, in the
Oh,
beginning
yeah.
of the book, I read, like, he said something
And,
about
like the
tampon.
tampon. Yeah.
Yes, it was disgusting. I was like,
Mhm.
I know a man wrote this.
Yeah.
The sex
It was
scenes
really
too,
weird.
Oh,
Yes. Yes.
like
Ugh.
describing
Yeah.
monstrous and ravenous.
Ew.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm
It was
like-
really gross.
It's really
It was
gross.
like-
You can tell it was written by a man for
Yeah.
sure. So one thing I wanted to bring up next was the ending of the novel,
Mhm.
which kind of adding on to this theme that it's from the point of views of these men. Well, at the end of the novel, the main character, who is unnamed throughout the entirety of the novel, says, "Everyone we spoke to dated the demise of our neighborhood from the suicides of the Lisbon girls. Though at first people blamed them, and gradually a sea change took place, so the girls were seen not as scapegoats, but as seers. More and more, people forgot about the individual reason." That's the wrong quote. Anyway, here's the quote. "But this is all a chasing after the wind. The essence of the suicides consisted not of sadness or mystery, but simple selfishness. The girls took into their own hands decisions better left to God. And they became too powerful to live among us, too self-concerned, too visionary, too blind." So, again, with blaming the girls for their suicides,
Yeah.
which I guess you could say is the point of the novel, is that these guys, but also, like, the typical reader is not going to look at that and be like, oh, yeah,
Yep.
it was Like,
Yeah.
at face value, what the narrator of the book is saying, it was their fault they killed
Yeah.
themselves. They should have thought about how it would affect the community, which is not what you're supposed to do in a response.
Yeah.
I feel like it would have been a lot more meaningful if the narrators and the parents took a deep look into themselves and understood what they were neglecting to do.
That's what I was going to
Yeah.
say. I was going to say that the selfishness that the boys attribute to the girls' suicides is really just a projection of their own selfishness and thinking that they were the saviors of the situation. And, and then the girls eventually, tricked them in the end. And when they invited the boys over, to help them escape the house, and then the boys come and they're all dead.
Yeah, they do kind of do a show of their suicide.
Yeah, but I think it was to prove that, like, they didn't need the boys to come save them because, there was no saving them and there was no running away.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. Okay. So my thing about it was that I feel like the parents should have done something more after Cecilia's death, because the girls are more vulnerable at that point. But then, like, after the thing with Lux and Trip, they just like locked them in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know. And also, like, the community didn't really do anything either after Cecilia's death. They were like,
Oh, yeah.
They were like, oh, okay.
They, like, threw that school-wide week.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
that's a big thing in the novel. After Cecilia's death, they have a whole suicide, like, panic
Yeah.
about people and their own teenagers
Right.
committing suicides, but they
Yeah.
never...
Well, it was interesting in the movie. There was like a bunch of news outlets covering the suicides, and they're like, suicide rates are so high right now, and like, we need to worry about it. And it's kind of interesting seeing it from a modern day perspective, knowing that suicide rates are higher now, and yeah, just seeing it. And I don't know. I feel like a lot of media, like, they don't cover that anymore, and we don't really talk about it, especially in the age of Corona. Like, with quarantine, it went up, and so it's like we don't even cover it now.
With me, what I get from that, and like the book and real life, like news coverage of suicide, and news coverage of suicide, they always talk about it being like a rising problem,
Oh yeah.
and it's such a big issue, but society itself is never able to like take a look at why people commit suicide, the deep reasons
Right.
people do that.
One, you're ostracized because there's this stigma around mental health that it's like, you're a weirdo. And that was the whole point. Like, Cecilia, they just kept saying she was the weird sister.
Yeah, they kept on saying she was like,
And that's why she
yeah.
killed herself, which is like, what? Like, where's the correlation? I don't get it. Like, I'm probably the weird sister among my siblings, but that was what they, used as their excuse for why she wanted to kill herself. So, yeah, that was definitely a point that I think he was trying to make.
Yeah. And then also, like, I think because the community was like so like picture perfect, it kind of like added to how they like couldn't really deal with like Cecilia's suicide, because they're like, we've never had to deal with this before and we don't really know how to, so we're gonna like do something like the bare minimum possibly, and then after that we're gonna like brush it under the rug and like it's not gonna happen again. But then it happened like 4 more times.
Yeah.
Yeah, onto that, with the picture perfect society, I think he put it in this picture perfect suburban society because he could have like put it in like a poorer neighborhood, but I think putting it in the society shows like the complexities of suburban America, and the fact that just because you're in a well-off position doesn't mean your mental health is perfect. It doesn't mean that suicide doesn't happen. What do I do?
Decline.
Decline.
My mom keeps FaceTiming me in the middle of...
I was going to say, I really found it interesting when the narrator brought up the suicide bridge at Cornell.
Oh, yeah.
At that time, I guess a lot of people were committing suicide at Cornell, and so the point he was trying to make was that... texting your mom.
my mom in the middle of the podcast.
The point he was trying to make is like, even these college kids who are free to have sex and go drink and, smoke weed, whatever, even they are stressed out about life and they, end up ending their lives. So I guess it just puts into perspective how the girls were feeling in such a restrictive household where, their parents even took them out of school and made Lux destroy all her records. So, yeah, I really liked that point.
It also kind of like makes me look at our own situation because we're at like
Yeah,
this
we're
good
college
university. We're privileged to be here.
We're number
course.
2 happiest students.
Yeah, okay. But yet we have discussed our own pitfalls with like our own mental health and like having to take a break and it's kind of like just because we're well off
Yeah.
where we are doesn't mean that we're not allowed to have
Yeah.
mental health
Yeah.
complexities
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So one thing that fascinated me with this book is that we talked about how these girls didn't have personalities, but only really one of the girls had a personality or like had things happen to them, and that was Lux. And with Lux, there was her whole sexual adventures in the novel.
She was a very complex character.
She was a very complex character.
Yeah.
I kind of
The
wish
movie
we
made
had
her out
more
to be
of
something else, though.
Oh yeah, the movie made her
Like, her
way
entire
over-sexual.
personality was sex.
Like, she was very suggestive in
Right.
the way she talked to men.
But then in the book, it didn't talk about that until, like, way later, after Cecilia's death. So.
Yeah, but I know, like, in the novel, one thing, they talked about how she brought men up through her house late at night.
Yeah.
So they could have sex on the roof.
Right. And it was, like, old, like, it was, like,
Like
40-year-old
40-year-old
guys. She was,
men.
like, what, 14, 15?
14,
Yeah.
15.
Yeah.
And she loses her virginity. Oh, well, we don't know if that's the loss of virginity on the
Oh, no,
football field. Or does
yeah,
it
yeah.
say that's
I,
her
that's,
virgin-
I think that was. Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
she loses her virginity, like, after a school dance. And then,
And then the dude who describes being so fascinated with this girl ups
Yeah.
and leaves and never talks to her again.
yeah, leaves her in the middle of the football field. Yeah.
I did not understand that. He literally, like in the book, he was like, all of a sudden, I didn't like her anymore.
Right, he was like, yeah, this is bad. And I guess that just goes to show, like, how much they objectified the
Yeah,
girls
how
and
much
just
they
saw them as
objectified the
objects,
girls.
yeah.
The girls were so objectified throughout this
Oh,
entire novel.
absolutely, yeah. So I wanted to talk about what suicide actually represents in the entire book, and how the meaning behind each of the girls ending their own lives are, I think it's like severely reduced by their age, like from the community's point of view, from their age and like also how many times it happens. So like the community by the end of the book is like completely numb to the entire idea of suicide. And another thing that really ruined the meaning, I think, for them was this guy, Dominic, like at the beginning of the book, jumps off his roof because of like an unrequited love, but then like it's not high enough, so he just gets up and walks away, and the entire like street sees it.
That's that scene in the movie.
Right.
He just jumps and lands in a shrub.
And then just walks down
and
the street.
everyone's watching, all the
Yeah.
other kids,
Right.
like knowing nothing is gonna
Yeah.
happen.
And so I think it's just like, and then in the movie, I don't remember if this happened in the book, but in the movie, like at the end, after all the girls ended up committing suicide, this guy like makes fun of it, and he's like, oh, I'm a teenager, and I have all these problems, so I guess I'll just kill myself, and then like jumps into a pool. So it's like the community is completely numb to the meaning of suicide and like the pain that the girls were going through, especially because they were so young, and they're like, oh, they don't have any problems in life because they're teenagers. So, yeah.
Yeah, with that, one of my favorite quotes from the book, and I underlined this in my book, at the beginning when Cecilia does her first suicide attempt, she's at the hospital, and the doctor asks her, what could you be worried about? There's nothing, you're a 13-year-old girl.
Oh, yeah.
What do you have to worry about life? And he's like, obviously, sir, no
You've never
offense,
been-
you've never
yeah.
been a 13-year-old girl.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that quote, and I underlined it.
Yeah, I did too.
It's kind of like the whole overarching
Premise.
theme of
Mhm.
the novel is that you don't know what these girls are going through,
Yeah.
so you can't assume that their life is perfect.
Right. Yeah. And so, exactly. Yeah, we don't know what they're going through, especially as the reader, from the boys' eyes. They're seen as like these damsels in distress that need saving, but like, what do they need saving from? Like, they have no idea what they're saving them from.
Which going back to the scene where the 4 older sisters end up killing themselves at the
Yeah.
end, they bring them over there and make a show out of it to prove that you couldn't save us.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I think we can skip to the movie adaptation.
Yeah, the movie
I
adaptation.
think we covered our other points.
So, going with the movie, I wanted to like discuss the movie compared to the book, how much we enjoyed it. Sheila, which one did you like better? How would you rate the movie?
I'll give it the same rating, like 3 or 2.75. I felt the same about the book as I did the movie. I thought it was a pretty true adaptation, and like throughout the movie, I was just like, yeah, it could be done better, but it also could
Yeah.
have been done a lot worse. So I was just like meh about the movie and also meh about the book.
Yeah, I brought it up when we were watching the movie, but it was insanely similar. And I don't know if either of you have seen American Beauty,
No.
but it was
No.
insanely similar to American Beauty, and just the same like angelic blonde girls. Well, in American Beauty it was just one girl, and then in American Beauty it was her sexual escapade. Kind of, it was very confusing for me to watch as like a freshman in high school whenever I had to watch it for school. Like with an older man, and it was like Lux when she had these like 40-year-old men go to a roof, but she didn't even enjoy it. Like Lux was like, this sucks. Like she was doing it, I guess, as a form of escapism. But yeah, the women were portrayed as nothing more than like sexual objects with no personality whatsoever. I will say, like Sheila, the movie was very true to the book up until the very end, where in the book, Mary is the last sister to end up living. Her suicide attempt didn't work with the other girls. And so she lived for a little bit longer and then eventually slit her wrists, I think, later on.
Or it was sleeping pills, right?
I
In the sleeping bag. She was laying in her family's, because they moved out completely.
Right, yeah.
And then as they're moving, they're sleeping on the floor, and they find her with a...
Right, you're right, yeah. So honestly, I did not like the movie as much as the book, so I gave it 2.5 stars. 2.5 out of 5 stars.
For me, personally, I liked the movie better. Just slightly better. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars compared to the 2 out of 5 stars that I gave the book. Partly because, I felt like it was more riveting just because it was an hour and a half runtime compared to reading it to
and Danny DeVito was in it. So.
And Danny DeVito was in it for
it's gotta
a
be
solid 10 seconds.
He was, yeah.
I changed my rating. 5 out of 5.
5 out of 5 stars, Danny DeVito. But yeah, I think it was a little bit more riveting. And with the Mary thing, it kind of like didn't make me as upset because the Mary thing happened in the book and the parents still wasn't okay.
Yeah.
They were
completely numb to it. At that point, they were just so...
Yeah,
they were kind of waiting for her to do it, you know?
Yeah, they were definitely expecting
what
it.
Eugenides was doing by like keeping Mary alive.
I thought it was kind of metaphorical because...
I think it was
I didn't even talk about the whole Virgin Mary thing. During their suicides, I was really confused by this. In the beginning, like they find this Virgin Mary card with Cecilia after she attempts to she slits her wrist in the bathtub, and they find this Virgin Mary card that says 555 Mary or something. And then they start finding these like cards all over town, and so I guess it's like metaphorical in some way, but I kind of really wasn't getting the point. But so I thought it was interesting and ironic that Mary, the girl named Mary, was the one who ended up living in the end until she kills herself after the rest of the So she didn't really end up living in the end, but she attempts and then survives and then dies again. Well, dies.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that with the suicides of the girls, it starts off with an attempt that fails, and then they die, and then it ends with an attempt that fails, and then she dies.
Yeah. All right, well, I think that's
all
we had to talk
discussing
about
today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for tuning in. Yeah.
Thank you. Make sure to join us in our next episode. And
follow us on Twitter and Instagram.
Yes.
What are we reading next? Oh, Lolita. That's why we're both reading it. Yeah.
So
we're going to talk about Lolita next. Again, young female seen as a sexual object. So
you can you can subscribe to us on YouTube. We Are Literate, and on Twitter we are we_are_literate, and then on Instagram we are just We Are Literate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Bye.